Elder millennials, what stereotype aggravates you the most? The use of the term millennial to refer to the general young person. As a younger millennial, I hate PPL bringing up that I eat tidpods. Mom, PPL my age were out of college and in the working world by the time TikTok challenges were a thing. Technically it's like 39-year-olds to 22-year-olds. That range needs to be split in two. I'm 35 and don't know WTF the 26-year-olds I work with are talking about half the time. We got blamed for spring break covered outbreaks. We aren't in college anymore. Edit went to bed and woke up to 25,000 likes. Thanks for the awards. Millennials has just become a term for young person with ideals I don't agree with. And the ones that are in college aren't partying because they're grown with bills and possibly families. I graduated from college in 2004. 17 years ago this spring. There are people reading this thread who aren't even alive yet. Back then the internet had only recently become a household service and still retained a lot of its 90s Wild West frontier feeling. Cell phones were only just starting to become popular for people who weren't businessmen. Reality shows were the new craze on cable TV. People with money to piss away were going nuts about the fancy new plasma screen and LCD flat screen TVs. In 2004 you could, and often still did, walk into businesses and hand a resume to a manager. Everyone still fully expected that they'd get the career they wanted. Buy a house, get a nice car, go on vacations, and grow old buying poop left and right. Nobody expected poop-tea starter homes to cost $400,000 or for jobs to require filling out a form read by a bot that, if successful, would see you competing with 1,200 other people for an entry-level position that pays ass. Times have changed. We are not today's college kids. Haha. I remember that. My favorite response was something like, "We are too old for spring break. We're at home with our kids struggling through virtual learning and trying to convince our parents to stay home from church." Frick. When people call teens and early 20s millennials, that was like 10 to 15 years ago. I've seen old people refer to Generation X members down to junior high students as millennials. It just means person under 50 who I don't like. Apparently. Yeah, I'm 34. My son is as close to the age boomers think a millennial is as I am. It's so aggravating that people use millennial as a slur for any spoiled naive youth. I'm a 39-year-old elder millennial with back pain. The youngest millennials are in their mid-20s. It's pedantic but it drives me up the wall how lazy people seem to assume anyone younger than they are is a millennial. I'm sure my Gen X brother doesn't enjoy being called a boomer. I, for one, am tired of hearing about the things we've killed. Tastes change all the time. This is not new. There's an anecdote that JFK killed the hat industry. Hats used to be a staple of American men's fashion. There were dedicated hat shops. Then JFK came along with his public image of a suave man with impeccable hair. Hats vanished from the mainstream fairly quickly, and the fedora has never recovered. I remember seeing one that was "Millennials are killing payday loans," and trying to imagine thinking payday loans are a good thing. It's actually interesting. Imo. We've got to have one of the most discriminating tastes of any generation in a long time. We just don't settle for deuce we're not happy with if there are other options that suit our tastes better. And what does that mean? Sorry cable. Streaming is better. Sorry garbage chain restaurants. Smaller niche restaurants are better. Sorry napkin industry. I've got a roll of paper towels. Sorry Harley Davidson. I've never seen, nor do I connect with Easy Rider. Sorry cruise industry gross. Next up, are millennials killing brick and mortar stores? I think it's interesting. Also, if industries can't keep up or offer a good service then they should die. The boomers also killed stuff. They killed radio dramas with TV and their grandparents killed the carriage industry by buying cars. Adapt or die. Biatch. We're saving money for avocado toast by not going to Applebee's. I had to go on a business trip and work with an older lady who was just about ready to retire. I managed trad shows and travel around North America to convention centers and hotels organizing events. She had an old school way of checking inventory by hand. I'm pretty good with Excel and Salesforce. So I had a faster way of doing it. I got the job done, like I've been doing for years, and left so I could go enjoy Vancouver. We've all heard the saying work smarter, not harder. She couldn't get it through her head that the workday was done for me. I found out from another colleague that she called me a lazy entitled millennial with no work ethic. So that's the stereotype I hate. I busted my ass and paid my way through college. I worked long hours and kissed ass to get to the position I'm in. I know plenty of other young professionals that have done the same. This idea from baby boomers that we're entitled or lazy gets tiresome. Edit. I didn't expect this to blow up overnight. I should mention what happened to her I guess. When we returned from the trip, I guess the organization holding the event complained about her for having a nasty attitude. They asked that we send someone different for the next trade show. I wasn't the only one that had issues working with her. The company ended up paying her off to just retire a few months later. And for all you Canadians messaging me, if I enjoyed Vancouver, before the pandemic I would travel every other week to a different city, and Vancouver is one of my favorite places I've been. I love your country. When borders open back up I'll be taking a vacation to Montreal. In my office, if you finish the arduous tasks you are given early, they just expect more work. They don't care about the quantity or quality, just that you punch in for 8 hours a day. Now that I work from home, I have a much better balance because no one can see me freaking around when I finish my tasks early. Just because it takes me 4 hours to do what takes my boomer coworkers 8 hours to do doesn't mean I should have to do more than them. I currently have the highest stats on my team. I'm also the only millennial, and when I finish my work I'm expected to pick up the slack for my coworkers who can only type 30 words a minute with a 75% accuracy rate. Yet, I'm the lazy and entitled one because I have more downtime. My mother-in-law called me lazy after I spent my vacation busting my ass helping her get rid of her heaps of junk because I was faster and more efficient than she was. Then my dad called my husband lazy for sleeping into 10 AM after he was up all night grinding concrete floors by himself. Both of them just got defensive when we called them out on it. We don't do any type of project with them now. Cause you know, we're lazy. Bro. It's the worst of all the stereotypes. I'm 38 and graduated in 2000, so I'm pretty much the first year of the millennial generation. I still get people telling me that I'm entitled, despite having close to 20 years work experience in my field. Like seriously, I have quit so many jobs and gone to work for other companies for more money because I'm not willing to wait for it. Like, get the frick out of here you broke ass boomer. That we don't take our jobs seriously. I had to sit my peer 55 plus down and tell him that the millennials he was bitching about were the same age as the very qualified and mission focused person has been working with for the past decade. We're upper management. I get extra salty about the boomers that are constantly on their phones playing Candy Crush or are posting misinformation on Facebook, but will be the first to say we are addicted to tech. Okay. So, I believe that is just the shame talking because you can't make a pivot table and I can. Kevin. I'm 35. Boss is 61. She complains about millennials. I remind her all the time that I'm a millennial as are her 2 adult children both about my age. What's worse, her 34-year-old daughter also complains about millennials. Apparently there are subdivisions of millennials. Come the truck on. Note to any 30-somethings complaining about millennials, you're not cool. You're a mucking idiot. Man, the older dudes at my work talk the most, complain the most, and do the more laid-back jobs. I'm getting really tired of hearing about us lying around expecting handouts and not working, especially when it's a situation where the person saying it is standing in a room with a lot of millennials, all of whom have jobs, which is every single time I've heard this said in real life. Like, who here is lying around doing nothing? Who's your example? Oh, it's your neighbor's best friend's cousin's son. He doesn't have a job and lies on the couch all day. Okay. A lot of millennials I know have multiple jobs, including monetizing their hobbies, and still just barely getting by. I haven't done this, but I always want to point out that hey, you must be talking about your own Dusity kids that you raised and their friends. My peers that I know aren't like that. And it is. It's always some upper middle class jerk that raised awful children. Ugh. When we are looked down upon for needing to use YouTube, etc. For learning tasks, for instance, changing a tire, that our parents were taught by our grandparents, but the former never took the time to teach us. My mother never taught me household skills when I was young. When I was a teenager, she insisted I do chores like loading the washing machine. Then she got mad when I asked her how the machine works. Because you are a teenager, you should know this. My 5-year-old knows how to load and turn on both the washing machine and the dishwasher. Looking down on someone for anything that they haven't yet been taught but are trying to learn is just about the stupidest thing I've heard. It's not their fault that no one had taught them the thing yet, and they are going out of their way to teach themselves. What is wrong with that? Younger generation takes initiative to learn skills older generation failed to teach. That we're entitled. Having worked with the general public for over a decade, I can assure you the overwhelming majority of entitled and rude behavior comes from the over 50s crowd. Edit. Also, they keep telling us to be more financially responsible, but when we are like, no, not like that. Can't wait to tell my judgmental extended family that I'm having a backyard wedding because I don't have 30k just lying around. My parents are already pissed about it. Stop wasting money going out to eat and be financially responsible. Millennials are killing the Ducity restaurant industry, OMG. As someone whose boomer mom demanded I have a large wedding, and then when I said no and she said, but I'll pay for it, and I took her up in it like an idiot, good job. My parents needed a new roof on their house, but instead they paid for my wedding, and then my mom guilted me about it forever. You must go to college and get a degree. You don't want to be flipping burgers or changing the oil in some rich guy's car, does that? Incurs a lot of debt. These irresponsible millennials and their elitist liberal educations. If they'd been smart, they'd go to community college and transfer/go to trade school. They won't just take a job. Any job to pay the bills. They could flip burgers. Why should we pay for their mistakes? I was talking about this with my dad the other day, and he was like, we didn't force you to go to college. No. Nobody straight up said I had to go to college. But they did spend an awful lot of time talking about how only truck ups don't go to college and making sure that entry-level jobs required a degree. This. Boomers. Stupid lazy millennials. Going to school and going into debt. Stop being entitled. Work any job. Flip burgers/do retail work if it pays the bills. Also boomers. Burger flippers/retail work are jobs for high school aged people. They deserve slave wages, and if they don't like it, go to school and get a better job. As an American, it's basically that we're inheriting a system that nobody trusts us to run. All the people who represent us are 2 to 3 times older than us. The older generations are refusing or unable to retire, which is preventing us from actually entering the job market. We currently have the most geriatric Congress in US history. The boomers refuse to concede power and continue to be elected as they still have share numbers on X, Y, and Z. That however will change by 2024 with a relatively even amount, and by 2028 most boomers will be too feeble or will have passed away to be able to make it to the polls. This is also preventing us from entering the housing market. When someone makes mention of some challenge teenagers are doing, like eating Tide Pods, and people are like, ugh, millennials. UHM. No, just because 4 to 5 people did something stupid and then the news decided to take it and run with it and make it sound way more widespread than it is, doesn't mean you get to generalize a whole generation. Secondly, millennials are practically the age of the parents of the TikTok generation. It's not a generic term for any young person doing something you don't like. The Tide Pod one makes me so angry. That people don't own a house because they're lazy. I have taken the time to explain the loss of buying power, stagnant wages, automation, contract employees, lack of job security, cost of living in other areas, etc. Clay way more into it. My boomer dad is one of the good ones. Took him a while to understand the sheer magnitude of disadvantages his kids will be facing, but he finally gets it. My sister and I don't point at him and say told ya so, because you can tell on his face that he's very sad. It's one of the few things that makes my hard as nails dad upset. He can't believe everything that we're dealing with, and he really started to understand it when he needed to look for work between jobs. Has self-employed, but it was a slow year and he had a 6-month gap between projects and needed to earn an income in the meantime. He was utterly bewildered with the job search. I've been self-employed longer than you've been alive. What more do I need to prove to these people? I remember him being so offended when he went to see a manager at a local auto body shop and they asked him for a resume. Lol, I've been doing this for almost 40 years. And they just tell me to apply online. I've owned shops longer than has been living. That's when my dad started to show a lot more sympathy to our job searches and hasn't been so hard on us. But what makes him so sad is that our buying power is just pathetic compared to this. He bought a home in 1990 for $110,000, 3-bedroom, at 15/hours, and my mother never had to work while raising us. My dad can't believe how things are now. I just shoveled like 20 of my elderly neighbors' driveways this morning after snowpocalypse. By Wednesday, while chatting they'll talk about those lazy millennials like they're still 20-year-olds. Bro, I'm 38 and got 4 kids and own the biggest house of this block. I'm millennial. Cannot convince them of this, ever. Edit. I know that I'm at the older end of millennial. Maybe in a macro generation like Xennial or Oregon Trail generation. But most lists out me as a millennial. With it starting in 81. Generations are kind of bull do swishy washy stuff anyways. Plus right as I was getting into adulting graduated college. Party and focus on job a few years. Then start transitioning into family life around 10 to 12 years ago. That's right at the time when the millennials killing X meme was starting up. As MLFWDS right as I was of age to start doing those things. So, I feel like I'm lumped in there since when the criticism started. A lot of it was blasted right at my age group at the time. They just have kept blasting the same age just out of college age group as millennials for over a decade now. Lol. They'll just hit you with well you're just one of the good ones. Or wish more of them were like you. Participation trophies. These were for our boomer parents. Not for us. And now we are blamed by them for being entitled because we got them. Definitely. Marking hate the concept of participation trophies. I've gotten into a shouting match with an older guy over them before. I was 10, your generation was the one handing them out dp. Marking lol. Exactly. I remember being insulted by my 3rd place trophy because there were only 4 teams. Like I get the idea of rewarding effort over achievement for younger kids, but damn I know how to count. I hate that millennials get pinned as being addicted to their phones. Like, always behind a screen and not interacting with the real world. I for one try really hard to have good phone etiquette, and what I've noticed is boomers can be really bad at this. Some of the older people in my office and family are the worst offenders when it comes to texting at the table or just checking out on social media. Every time my husband and I are at the airport we talk about this. Every boomer there is glued to their phone, that weird way they look down at it, but also up somehow tapping away at some mindless game. Often with the sound on. The sound on boomers kill me. Like many, I'm working from home. I'll get a call from my mom, hey you are not working now. Go do something for me. Thanks. Working from home is why I pooped than going to real work, at least for me. I do fit the stereotype of hating talking on the phone. I work primarily at night. One of my jobs I generally get out at midnight. The other more like 4 AM. My mom acts like I don't have a job. The most ridiculous thing is she babysits my daughter overnight when I work. Being blamed for not buying things. Like, millennials are killing X product line. Welp, the boomers who won't retire are clinging to the top level jobs. So we don't have the opportunities they did to move up and earn more money. So we have to be choosy about the things we spend our money on. Not to mention, most of us are trying to be mindful of our consumerism as a whole. Not buying tons of stuff for the sake of having tons of stuff. The consumerism thing is tricky for them to understand. My in-laws are downsizing. And they keep asking if we want his decorative plates and candy dishes mostly. But also every single toy my husband ever had growing up they get offended when. No, we don't want junk to keep in the garage. They also get offended if we accept a decorative plate with the intent of actually using it as a plate. Boomers need to pay us better if they want us to buy stuff. The stereotype that a lot of millennials are struggling with money because they're lazy and entitled is ridiculous. Look at the average wage versus the cost of rent, healthcare, and higher education now, versus what it was a few decades ago. Boomers had it far easier than we did, but act like our generation's struggles just boil down to a lack of hard work. Also, the participation trophy meme, aside from being largely bullpoop anyway, raises the question, whose generation was giving out the participation trophies? Why would you blame the kids who received them? Seriously. It's like, have you ever thought that the reason you gave us participation trophies was because you were too lazy to work with your kids when they failed at something? I kinda laugh when boomers call us snowflakes when they seem like the bigger bunch of wimps in history. Anytime they get a taste of their own medicine they act like it's an assault on their freedom. Every generation has things they get offended about, but just disagree on what should be offensive. Case in point, an argument I 33 had with my mom 64. She was all mad because a children's library at an elementary school had removed a book which used the term Chinaman and included racist imagery in the illustrations. I claimed the book was offensive and not suitable for children, and she said my generation was too sensitive and easily offended. In the same conversation she got super offended because I used the word duck. We can't afford houses because apparently we spend too much on avocado toast. No. In the 80s and 90s houses were about 3 to 4 times the average annual income. Now it's close to 10, at least in my part of the world. My dad bought a house in an inner Melbourne suburb in the 70s for $90,000. It's valued today at over $2 million. He bought it on about 3 years worth of wages. With no university debt. I have 2 degrees, work full time, and I couldn't even buy a Doo-City 1-bedroom apartment with 6 years worth of wages, let alone a house on 3. When millennials did crap that Gen Zers and boomers did, but for some reason we get derided as the crappiest generation to ever get whelped. When millennials take cooking classes and sewing classes and basic auto repair classes and other crap our parents were too lazy/busy to teach us. But no one ever talks about that part we're derided as being helpless and needing adulting classes. When Gen Zers and boomers did literally exactly the same thing, it was celebrated at self-improvement and the American dream and called taking a class down at the Y/learning annex/community college. They also just had home ec and car repair and various life useful classes in school. But then when they were in charge pulled them as being an unnecessary use of time and money because the Asians have higher math scores. But shame on us for having to learn these skills on our own. That I'm lazy and entitled. 60 hours a week logging, while middle class boomers take 2-hour lunch breaks and take a half day off for golf. And the middle class boomers are only working to get the rest of their pension, which you won't get because you're not grandfathered into the old retirement benefits. 1981 here. The stereotypes are amazing. Every time I hear an insult aimed at millennials I'm amazed and amused that anyone thought it was an insult. An entire demographic dedicated to making sure everyone is doing something they believe in. That we all get the support we need, and putting uploads out of business. I'm honored to be counted among them on a technicality. I'll start. Avocado toast is the reason we won't be able to retire. An older person told me avocados are expensive. Healthcare is expensive. I'm choosing to spend a bit more on healthy food in the hope that I'll spend less overall by staying healthy. Also, the most expensive avocado I ever purchased was $1.79, which is 0.10 less than your checkout line 20-ounce Diet Coke. Furthermore, I shop discount stores like Aldi. Avocados are regularly on sale for 0.49 while you're shopping at Publix with your retirement fund. Seriously. We are what the previous generation made us, and we have been shaped by the world we were raised in, and then we are attacked for who we've been perceived to become as a result. It's like getting angry at the puddle of milk because you threw the carton on the floor. I'm 31. I played golf with my father around Christmas. Before I got fired he asked how my job was going. I said it was okay. Stressful. And they were giving me more responsibility. He asked if they were gonna pay me more, and I just laughed for a good few minutes. He had a bewildered look and said, well, that's how it's supposed to work, isn't it? You need to stand up for yourself and demand more money. I seriously looked at him and asked where has been the last 20 years. Employers don't like your tone of voice. they kick you to the curb and get someone else willing to be their robot and be programmed to how they demand you act and carry out tasks. So I'm 33 millennial age, right? And I deliver pizza. I have 2 coworkers who are both 66. If I ever don't get a tip, I just shrug it off. It hardly ever happens. And it's not required. When either of them don't get a tip, they throw ducking pussy fits. I don't hear the end of it. So I just think it's funny that my generation is the one seen as entitled. It really pisses me off how older generations constantly perpetuate the idea that millennials have no manners and are just inherently douchey and rude. I have worked in retail, a call center, and social services for my entire working life. So I have communicated with a lot of different people from all age groups and all walks of life. Without a doubt, there is an absolute and distinct difference in manners between millennials and folks from older generations. Of course I can't paint everyone with a broad brush, but if I had to list the 100 most entitled, bat-deuce crazy, unbelievably rude people I have ever spoken to, maybe only 10 of them would be millennials. We're better known as zennials, because we relate more to the life experiences of Generation X kids than to younger millennials. It's those of us born 78 to 83, anyway. I hate the stereotype that we don't know how to work and that our parents fight our battles for us. Fool. 85% of us were latchkey kids that raised ourselves. When all the college kids were out partying during the pandemic were called millennials. That was Gen Z. I had family blaming my generation for this poop. The 2 stereotypes that irk me the most are: 1. We don't work hard enough and want handouts. Since high school I've worked all kinds of jobs. Restaurants, retail. I dabbled in construction while pursuing a trade. I've been to college, etc. And I still feel like I'm never going to have the lives my parents/grandparents have. The cost of living just isn't the same, and I feel like every time I get a foothold on things the goalpost gets pushed back. I'm not lazy. I'm just tired of trying so damn hard. I don't want handouts. I just want the tax dollars I pay to benefit me. These people are out of touch. We're soft, over-emotional snowflakes. While working all these jobs the past 16 years I've seen folks my parents' age explode at Walmart calling employees dangleviers because they weren't helped soon enough. I've seen grown men 40 plus years old almost come to blows on a construction site over minor disagreements. I've seen boomers struggle to take advice from younger folks in their field despite the younger folks having the most up-to-date strategies too set in their ways. I've seen them female dog and moan over societal changes that don't affect them at all. I've seen how moody the older generations can be. Don't act like my generation is a bunch of emotional crybabies when you're in your office, having a freak out because you can get your digital calendar to work right.